trained from a family of armed robbers with the strength and agility to take over any bank in the world, Williams James Sharp decides to make a name for himself out of that world, so he leaves his father, who was a veteran criminal, and his stepbrother Danny to join the military thereafter, becoming an Afghanistan Marine veteran. He got married to Amy and now has a son. Unfortunately, that life can't be enough for him, as Amy falls sick and needs an experimental surgery that the insurance has refused to cover. He calls all the insurance companies he knows, but they are making him talk to robots instead of humans. He leaves home that day after telling Amy that he has gotten a job as a truck driver. Before leaving, Amy tells him she had received a call from a blocked number earlier and she hopes the call isn't from Danny, as he doesn't need Danny at that moment. He tells Amy that he knows he has all he needs, and he indeed doesn't need Danny, so he isn't going to meet him. Well, let's hope that's the truth. On the other hand, Cam is the best paramedic in the history of the medical profession. No matter how strong the accident is or how injured the victims are, you can always trust Cam to get them in good shape until they get to the hospital. The queen of paramedics goes to do her thing in a road accident involving a little girl. She helps the girl get to the hospital safely, and her new partner, Scott, assumes she is traumatized by what she has just seen and tries to speak with her, but Cam says she is more hungry than traumatized, and all she needs is food, so they go to a nearby restaurant and get some food. Contrary to what he had told his wife, Will is actually coming to meet Danny. When he comes to the car store that Danny manages, he sees all the large cars that his brother owns and manages, and he is shocked. Catching up with old times, Danny tells him that no matter how crazy their relationship had ended back in the day, he is still his only brother, and he has not taken him for granted as a brother, so he will always be there for him. Their father is now dead, and Will didn't go home at all despite that. Danny brings out the things he had seen in their house when he went after their father's death, including their photos when they were young, which brings back old memories. Will reveals that he needs Danny's help, and he needs to lend a sum of money. Danny informs him that he will get way more than that, and another member of Danny's crew, who Danny calls Mel, comes there and asks Danny, "Is this the guy?" Will doesn't understand the question, but it means they had been expecting him. Suddenly, a truck is driven underground, and inside that truck are several guns. Will gets the picture that they are trying to paint, and the fact that they are about to rob, and Danny wants him to join. He needs money, but he doesn't want to return to that kind of life, so he immediately refuses to join them. Meanwhile, while eating, Scott tries to befriend Cam, and tells her the little girl she saved earlier will survive. He feels since Cam was invested, Cam would like to get feedback. However, Cam informs him that she wasn't even invested. It was just a normal job. The worst days in the life of the patients is just a normal Tuesday in the paramedic's life, so it's not a big deal. Seeing how much she doesn't want to speak with him, Scott informs her that he had heard about her before, and how no one wants to be her partner at work because of her weird attitude. Well, she doesn't care either. Danny starts to convince Will that they are going to rob the federal bank for a sum of $32 million, and it is a one-time job that won't disturb anyone, so he doesn't have to worry at all. Seeing how much he needs the money, Will accepts to do the job, and he follows them to the bank. Will this decision not destroy his life? The plan goes well. They enter the bank, they make their way to the vault, but unfortunately, Zach, a police officer who is seeing one of the cashiers at the bank, Kim, and is on patrol with his partner, Mark, comes into the bank. Danny attends to Zach by the door, asking that he come back in 20 minutes, but Zach wonders why the bank is closed during the day, so they allow him in and hold him hostage. Mark wonders why Zach is taking that long, and the truck that one of the gang members, Randazzo, is driving even stops in front of the bank, and Mark helps him repair it. When they get the money, they have to shoot their way out. They start shooting at Mark, and immediately the fight starts, and Cam and Scott get called to go to the scene. All the other members that are stationed outside are shot, and they die, while Danny and Will take Zach hostage so they can escape through the back of the bank. As they struggle, Will mistakenly shoots Zach in the leg. They leave Zach and try to escape through the other side. Danny takes his mask and wears it, telling Will they will have to shoot their way out. When Will tries to claim that isn't part of the plan, Danny reminds him he had earlier shot a cop, and that also wasn't part of the plan. Mark gets to Zach and calls the paramedics. Cam and Scott come there, and Cam takes Zach to the bus to take care of him. Danny sees them, so he confronts them at gunpoint, telling Scott to come out of the truck. He asks Will to drive the truck while he goes to the back and threatens Cam to save his life instead of Zach's. They reach the police block and pretend to be paramedics, while at gunpoint, Cam lies to the officer that they are paramedics and they need to save Zach's life. They are allowed to go, but this success won't continue for a long time, as Mark finds injured Scott by the park and asks Scott what happened. Scott reveals that the ambulance had been hijacked, and Zach is in the ambulance. Mark immediately calls the officers to inform them that the ambulance is taken. By that time, Captain Monroe has been deployed to take care of the situation, so he calls his crew, including a young lady, to monitor the ambulance through helicopter, and also sends out his dog in search of the criminals. To make matters worse, Cam tries to escape by running out of the ambulance, and while Danny is trying to convince her to return, Zach's situation gets worse, and Cam returns to the ambulance to get things settled. The car chase gets severe, as Monroe sends all the police vehicles behind the ambulance. Realizing that he needs help, Danny calls Pappy, one of his father's former colleagues in the stealing business, and asks Pappy to create a diversion on his behalf, so they can escape the situation. He tells Pappy that he has $18 million in the ambulance, and if he survives, he will give Pappy $8 million. He knows Pappy is in debt, and he needs to pay some money. Pappy agrees to work with him, and he sends a truck to block the road so that the police won't reach them. At that point, Zach's situation is worse, and he needs surgery urgently. In fact, he needs blood. Will informs them that he is O positive and a universal donor so they can take his blood. The car chase gets worse, and Monroe closes in on the ambulance. He tells all his police to take their cars and chase the ambulance in several ways. While trying to save his partner, Mark takes Monroe's personal car and enters it so he can chase. He is the most passionate in the team at that moment, for reasons you can all assume, so he is the first to close in on the ambulance. Danny takes Cam out and uses Cam as leverage to survive. Not like they care about the paramedics, but they at least care about the officer on board. Suddenly, Monroe's dog starts barking. Monroe realizes that his dog has been taken to a car chase, and he isn't ready to let his dog die. He immediately calls back the chase and instructs every officer to return to base. On the other hand, the FBI officer in charge of the bank robbery, Anson Clark, checks the information of the robber and finds out it's Danny Sharp. He knows Danny from when Danny was sent by his father to the FBI Academy so he can get the secret of the Academy. As a result, Anson is Danny's old friend. He immediately meets Monroe, telling Monroe that Danny isn't someone they can kill like that. And in case they don't know, the only reason Zach is still alive is because Danny is using him as a leverage to survive. Zach starts bleeding out, and Cam finds out that he was shot twice, and he would die if he didn't get surgery. She calls a colleague who is a doctor to lead her through how to perform the surgery, despite the fact she isn't experienced. Will joins her in performing the surgery, and Anson calls Danny to ask what's up. Danny informs Anson that they are trying to save the cops so they can be released. At that moment, it all starts closing in for Zach, but Cam and Will do their best, and Zach survives. Unknown to the doctor that Zach survived, the doctor calls Monroe, telling them that the cop is dead. Monroe immediately commands his crew to close in on the ambulance, and even sacrifice Cam by killing them all. According to him, no one who kills a cop gets to survive. Anson calls Cam to inform her to bend under the stretcher so she can survive, and she immediately screams to Anson that Zach is alive. It's almost too late for Monroe to call his snipers, who are closing in on them already. But Cam screams to Danny about the snipers, and they survive the shootout. After surviving the shootout, Monroe calls the snipers back and calls Danny. Danny is angry that they assume he won't do anything, and they are pushing him to the wall. He insists he will show them what made his father one of the best robbers on Earth, and he will kill Cam. He tries to kill Cam, but Will brings him back into control, thereby causing a fight between the brothers. They fight and eventually reconcile, so Anson tries to convince Will to stop the car. He tells Will he will be released, but Danny reminds Will he will be in jail if he is caught. Anson talks about Amy, so he can get Will emotional, saying Will joined the Marines so he can escape from that kind of life his father had. Eventually, Will insists he won't be stopping the car. Amy calls Will to ask about his well-being, and Will lies that he had gotten the job and started immediately. Monroe calls back his crew in hopes of laying ambush for the brothers at their destination. Unknown to him that Pappy has instructed some guys to take another ambulance to the bridge. In fact, 2 other ambulances so they can cause a diversion. They drive into the middle of LA Rivers and arrive at the bridge where Danny instructs Roberto, Pappy's son, to paint the ambulance he is inside to green. By the time the police close in on them again, with 2 separate ambulances that were the normal red and white color, comes out a green one. The police put their attention on the 2 ambulances and they stop the first one and see it's empty. They realize the second one should be where Danny is, so they lay an ambush for it. Unknown to them, Roberto is the one driving the ambulance, and the ambulance is filled with explosives. Roberto jumps down from the ambulance and lets it get to the ambush, thereby setting the officers ablaze and injuring Monroe. As Roberto tries to escape, Mark runs after him and kills him. When Pappy finds out at home, he is devastated about losing his son. Pappy sends another car with automatic guns to the police to destabilize them, while Danny eventually makes his escape. They arrive at Pappy's place and give Pappy his part of the money. However, for revenge for the loss of his son, Pappy insists they leave Zach and Cam with him. Danny suggests that he can only leave Zach with them, but he can't leave Cam. But Will says he isn't leaving anyone. In the ambulance, Zach wakes up and Cam tells him all that has been happening. He brings out a gun that was in his shoes, and he tells Cam they should shoot too. Danny cooperates with Will, and they turn against Pappy and his men, thereby killing them. As gunshots erupt in the sky, Will runs back to the ambulance and Cam, assuming it was one of Pappy's men, shoots Will in his arm. Danny gets there and Cam lies it was Pappy's men, and she tries to treat Will. As she does so, Will puts some of the cash in her bag, telling her to give it to Amy. When the police clock in on Danny, he stops the ambulance and comes to the back. He sees the gun and asks Cam how he had gotten there. He assumes it was Zach who shot Will, but Cam says she was the one. He cries to them that Will was trying to save them, but they killed him. He realized he has no other choice, so he plans to shoot Cam in front of the world. He holds Cam at gunpoint and goes outside the ambulance. Left with no other choice, Will takes the gun and shoots his brother from behind. He is also handcuffed, and before taking his last breath, Danny apologizes to Will. The police refuse to attend to Will and take him to the hospital. Amy arrives with her son and screams for help. Cam goes to help Will and screams to Mark that it was Will who saved Zach. They eventually take Will for treatment, and Cam meets Amy. She begs Amy to try to forgive Will, and she puts the money in Amy's child carriage. When Zach wakes up, he tells the police that Will saved him. Amy waits outside the ward as Will gets treatment, and realizing that saving someone isn't a normal Tuesday, Cam goes to the ward of the child she had saved earlier that day, and she holds her hands before leaving the hospital as the movie ends. Wow, another great movie with all the suspense you can think of. If you want more movies of this type, kindly follow our channel. See you next time.